Hello, my name is Dexter Garner. I'm a sales engineer here at Fairwinds, and today I'm going to be speaking to you all a little bit about our admission controller. What is our admission controller? There's two different aspects to it. There's running it passively versus running it enabled. So we have a two-pronged approach here to policy at Fairwinds. We have our CI integration, which would be shift left, getting policy concerns and feedback in your development pipeline. And then we also have our admission controller, which is acting as an in-cluster mutating webhook that can handle admission requests and enforce policy. We would kind of refer to it as a bouncer or the final line of defense before objects or resources are created within your cluster. So first and foremost, within the platform, your policy lives down here in the bottom left. There's a number of ways to control that policy via a settings file using CLI. You can create custom policies with OPA, or you can just simply utilize our out-of-the-box Polaris checks. Regardless, you can visualize the context and where policy is enforced in these three different columns here. So you have CI, which I discussed, admission, which is the topic of today, and then you simply have the in-cluster agent, which is going to prompt warnings of different severity levels. You can adjust those as well with our settings file. However, clicking into admission, let's just look at the policies that we're going to block on. In this example today, I'm going to be pushing or trying to deploy a very simplistic deployment file. I know that this privilege escalation should not be allowed, has been notated as true on our deployment file. And so we're going to block that deployment from being created when the admission controller is enabled. Clicking back into clusters will show you, I'm going to click into my little development cluster here. This is just a local Minikube cluster. There's two aspects of the admission controller within your cluster's overview. So first you have the install hub, which is where you can click into the tile. You can toggle it on and off. You can toggle the tools in which admission controller is going to handle requests based off of. So Polaris, OPA, as well as Pluto. Pluto's focused on deprecated API versions. So currently I do have it enabled. So we're not going to worry about that for the time being. And then secondly, we have our admission controller UI. So you can visualize all your requests over a date range. You can visualize them on whether they've passed, failed, or all your results. So let me just walk you all through a quick example. I'm going to just go to my code editor and I'll pull up my terminal alongside it. So over on our right, you can see I have this deployment file. I have allow privilege escalated notated as being true. So that's the policy that's going to fail this particular deployment. There are also other warnings that we'll see based off of other notations or lack thereof on this deployment file, but I'll walk you through some of those as we get alerted here in my terminal. So let me just jump in and go ahead and deploy this. Okay, great. So as anticipated, I do have a number of warnings. So these are going to be policies that would not necessarily fail the deployment. These are just based off of my particular settings. Again, all these are customizable. And then down towards the bottom, you can see that we have an error from server. Privilege escalation should not be allowed. There's error when creating the deployment file. And you can see that the admission webhook from insights.fairwinds.com has denied our request. So that deployment was not created, acting as intended. Let me jump back into my browser. Let me just start from clusters. Coming back into the admission controller. So you can see here, this was my latest attempt at deployment at 10:43. It was failed based off of this policy up top. Privilege escalation should not be allowed. Nice thing as well, we're always going to give you that remediation advice so developers can self-service. They can go back and fix their security context and try to redeploy. Exiting out of that, I'm going to jump into the install hub, come back into our admission control tile, toggle passive mode to on, and hit update. I like to just jump back into clusters to ensure that is taking effect. And then I'm going to try to deploy that file again. Great. So you can see that the passive admission controller deployment was created. We still do receive all these warnings. So you can notate that that deployment will have failed just because of that policy being enforced or enacted. But you can see here that the deployment has failed just based off of this policy still. However, it was created within my cluster. So I could go back through kubectl, get deployments. Let me see what I called this. Passive admission controller deployment. That's the P. I'm just going to copy that over. This is the namespace I've created, so you can see that it's up and running. So everything's working as intended. Again, if you guys do have questions, a lot of the impetus behind running the admission controller as passive mode is you can still blanket the same policy across all your clusters. However, maybe it's a development cluster. You want developers to still get that feedback, but you don't want to slow them down with their deployments. Or there's always a learning curve with utilizing any new technology. So we do have kind of a maturity or adoption curve where you can still see those warnings that would take effect when the admission controller is enabled. However, you don't want to slow down that deployment process. So a number of reasons why people would take advantage of that, but please just let us know if we can help. Thanks so much.